Hey everyone, Jeff Cloutier here with On Target Strategy. A while back, we shared a blog post that talked about product success planning versus product launch planning. And surprisingly, it got a lot of attention and feedback. And well, I guess I shouldn't say surprisingly. I meant to say, as expected, our blog got a lot of attention and feedback. But regardless of the truth there, it was a topic that, as I mentioned, we got a lot of feedback on. So we thought it would be a wonderful one to go into more detail within this webinar here today. So that's what we'll be talking about: product success planning and versus product launch planning. And we say one versus the other. Obviously, we don't mean not doing product launch planning, because that, well, just saying that sounds dumb, right? Product launch planning is very important, critical to an overall success of a product. Gives you that initial market exposure that you want, helps identify those early adopters and get their support and builds momentum. So obviously, we're not saying not do it. What we're saying is extend beyond just the launch planning. There are so many more parts of a product's life cycle, so many different stages, like the growth stage and the maturity stage, and when you sunset a product. And there's a lot of value to planning for those more mature stages, those latter stages early on, even before you launch a product. It's great to have a plan in place that obviously it's going to change, right? You're not going to be able to predict everything that's going to happen in the market for the life of the product. But by doing this early planning, when those latter stages come about and things happen, you just have an established, well thought out plan to modify and divert from, rather than having to come up with something at the last minute under pressure. Yeah, that's what we're trying to avoid here, is overall life cycle product success, right? Not just in launch, but through the whole lifespan of a product. And I have a little story here that I think really drives that point home. A couple months ago, when my wife and I were on vacation, we met this interesting couple. And yeah, when I say interesting, I mean a little strange. They were bike packing, riding their bikes from Alaska to Argentina. So taking 12 months off and essentially riding their bikes across all of North and South America. And so we get to talking to them about their planning for this trip. And if they took on just the launch planning strategy, maybe they would have planned from their trip from Alaska down to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, when we met them, with the thought that, hey, if we get this far, we'll have a lot of experience behind us, we'll know what to do, and for the rest of the trip, we can just handle it day to day, right? When it comes up, we'll just deal with it. There's no problem there. It's a possible strategy, probably not one that you or I would adopt if we were on our bikes for 12 months, riding across all of North and South America. And luckily for these two, that is not the strategy that they took either. They planned out their entire trip from point A to point B in meticulous detail. So I think it took them almost as long to plan the trip. I think they spent pretty much a year planning it out. And by doing that, they were talking about being able to avoid risks with road construction in South Texas. They were able to take advantage of positive things, like a fiesta they wanted to attend in Mexico and make a stop and a diversion for that. So they were able to establish a very well thought out, complete plan that gave them confidence for the entire life cycle of their trip, going from point A in Alaska to point B in Argentina. And it's very easy then to translate those same strategies, those same thoughts to a product plan. Point A is the introduction. Point B is the sunset or obsolescence of that product. And we talk about just focusing on launch planning and leaving everything else for later. We're taking a similar approach that what we talked about we would all avoid, right? It was just planning for the introduction for the beginning and just leaving the rest maybe for chance or take it as it comes. When we're talking about product success planning or product lifecycle planning, we're talking about very early on looking at every stage of a product's life cycle, because your actions from product management to pricing to marketing is going to be a lot different at the different stages. What you do in introduction obviously is a lot different than what you're doing when you're sunsetting a product, but it's significantly different than what you're doing maybe during the maturity stage, when you're trying to maintain market share that you have and fight off competition, as opposed to the growth stage, where you're really focusing on acquiring market share and exposing your product to the marketplace. So a lot of value in the holistic planning and doing it even before you launch the product. Because as we know these days, we're all super busy, have more things than we know what to do to fill our day. And when you say, well, we'll handle it here, we'll handle it here, we all know that there's a 99% chance that something else will be competing for that attention. Either another product, another project. It'll never really allow us the time we need to give that additional planning for each stage. It's true justice, right? That we're just going to react to fires that come up and try to get away with what we can because of everything else that's going on. So another reason why to focus on the total life cycle, total success planning, even before you launch it, because in most cases, that's really the only time where you have the attention and a lot of times the support of the other cross-functional areas, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. So what I'd like to talk about now is the template that we use here on Target Strategy to walk through our own product success or product life cycle planning with our clients or for our clients. So today I'd like to go through the template, some of the key areas and rationale behind it, and then most importantly at the end, show you where you can go to request a free copy of our template to use during your own planning or within your own consulting with your clients. So real briefly here's what the table of contents looks like. The reason for showing this is just to point out that, it's fairly complete. With the theory behind that or the rationale behind that being, it's better to consider something and then delete it than to not have it there and then at the 11th hour in hindsight, oh my gosh, I wish I had considered it. So that's the theory behind this. A lot of times we start here and we will delete things ourselves if it's not appropriate to certain markets. So fairly complete template. Use what you like, delete anything you think that is extraneous or that you don't need, it doesn't pertain to your particular market or field. And if there's anything missing, obviously add that. If you do have a moment, we'd love to hear from you if there's anything you're going to add, because we'd really appreciate the opportunity to revise our templates and then send that out to the broader group, to all of our colleagues, so we always can move forward in the effort of continuous improvement there. So now let's get into the actual template, into the meat and potatoes here. First off, the product and service executive summary. And executive summaries, I know we all dread writing these. It's something that we save to the end, right after we write the entire document to make sure that we have all the information we need. A lot of times you're sitting there at 11:30 at night with the executive summary still to write. Not only do you have to write that, but in most cases you have your kid's science project that you need to get done that night for the next morning also. So you have a bunch of things competing for your time. And in most cases, or at least from my personal experience, sometimes we slight the executive summary. And I'm saying don't do that here. Don't slight the executive summary for two reasons. One, a lot of times the people that you really want to read and appreciate your total product plan, your total success plan here, is your boss and your boss's boss. And those are probably the most time-challenged people of anyone. And so a lot of cases, they're looking to your executive summary to understand the key takeaways in the shortest amount of time. So don't ruin the opportunity to impress the people that you want to impress with your executive summary. A poorly written executive summary, it's pretty easy to see because you read it and you really don't feel like you understood anything about the product or the plan or the strategy. Secondly, because there is a lot to a product plan and to a product success plan. A well-written executive summary will really show a command of the material, the command of the content. And what I mean by that is it's very easy to make sure you cover everything in a 200-page plan, right? Because eventually, either intentionally or unintentionally, you're going to cover everything, right, in 200 pages. But it's actually more difficult to make sure you cover all the key points that you bring up and highlight all the important takeaways in 1.5 pages. So by being able to write a very complete and successful executive summary really shows you and shows your teammates and the rest of the organization that you understand the topic, you understand the strategy, and you understand the marketplace. So very, very important there. Next is being able to link your product to the greater business objectives of your company or your business unit. If you can't link the two and show how your product supports the overall strategy, then it's time to stop and regroup and figure out, hey, why are we actually doing this? It helps you ensure that you're keeping the big picture in mind, not only for you, but for everyone that reads your document. Maybe they're not quite in tune with why you're doing the product, and providing some information on the link between overall strategy and how your product is a cornerstone for that helps people support it, right? Helps get the rest of your organization, the reader, behind the need for your product. So something that I think is very important. But sometimes as product managers and marketers, in an effort to get on with the writing of the rest of the document, we tend to slight this area also because, heck, we know it, so why do we have to write it down if we know it? Well, yeah, you might know it, but as I mentioned, everyone else that's reading your document may not know it. And secondly, another important thing here is to remember that in today's agile development world, we're not writing as many product requirement documents, detailed product requirements documents. So this overall linkage of product to business strategy helps those development teams and the rest of the product development group make sure they understand that overall business objective. So when they go and create the product, they can keep those in mind. So again, it's a repository for all that strategic information that you want the reader to know. And as you can see here too, that I have milestones and schedule pretty early on in the plan. Wow, shouldn't this be at the end after we cover everything? Well, no, because this is probably one of the most critical areas where people fail in overall delivery of a product. The proverbial product graveyard is full of great ideas where a product manager or a marketing manager or project manager just couldn't execute, right? They couldn't deliver it on time or on budget or meet the performance goals, and they just decide to cancel it. So very early on, it's good to make sure you understand not only what you're going to do, which is the majority of what we talk about, but how you're going to go about doing it. When are things going to get done? What resources do you need to accomplish your goals? Who is going to do it? And not only the who from your standpoint, but sitting down and talking with those resource managers, those functional managers that you need to get support and buy-in from to get access to those resources. And from my experience, it's a lot easier to have those discussions with a functional manager 8 months, 6 months before you need a resource than when you're talking to them the day before you need it. The conversation is totally different. 8 months ahead of time, they're really appreciative of the collaboration. You're reaching out so early, incorporating their opinions, letting them take charge of their own work and putting their own stamp, if you will, on the plan. When you come to them and kind of not request, but kind of demand resources a day ahead of time because you have no other option, the conversation sometimes doesn't go very well. The volume often is a lot higher, is a lot greater. The tone is sometimes not quite as friendly. So get ahead of the game here. And that's one of the values of planning for those latter stages early on is you can have those discussions and have multiple discussions and work through issues and not have time be a constraint. So just like we talked about making sure you understood the business strategy, understanding the market and the competitive landscape is also important for obviously a lot of different reasons. That's something that you need to know yourself. But again, don't get too comfortable with your knowledge. Sometimes we get complacent with markets and competitors that we know and we've been working with for a long time. But markets change so much these days, and maybe not in the macro sense, but definitely in the micro sense. So it really does behoove even the experienced product manager or marketing manager to go through the exercise of reviewing the market, because sometimes you can tease out these key micro changes that can help you accelerate market share or a certain messaging positioning that helps get the attention of those early adopters or ideal customers a lot sooner. So that's one of the reasons here. Don't get complacent and think you know everything about the marketplace, because that's exactly what your competitors are hoping you're going to do. And then secondly, repeating what I mentioned before, in today's agile environment, very, very important to ensure that you have some key description and some background on the market and competitors for your development partners, for those development teams to reference back to something where they can understand how to create use cases and user scenarios to create the right product. Again, if you're still using a waterfall method and you're still creating a lot of really detailed product requirement documents, then maybe this isn't as critical in some other cases. But I have a feeling the majority of you are using a very agile development methodology, and agile development is not just for the R&D folks, but agile development is really an organizational adoption, and marketing needs to make sure that they're doing their part. Product management needs to make sure they're doing their part just as much as the R&D or the development side of the house. Again, won't mention too much here because it follows along what we're just talking about, but making sure you understand the messaging, positioning. A lot of things, I agree, stay the same in a marketplace from a macro standpoint, but from a micro standpoint, things are changing every day. Don't get complacent there. So you can see here I have a quadrant map that a lot of us are familiar with, a lot of us use. A little strange to see this early on in a plan and overall product strategy. I understand that, but I've always found it to be valuable to look at these two particular attributes very early on. And that's cost versus value or cost versus differentiation. If you're not familiar with these quadrant charts, each box has its own combination of attributes, where in the upper right here, which is where we all want to be, is high differentiation, high value in the marketplace. So customers view your product with high value so that they also willing to pay a premium price for it. Whereas opposed to the lower left here, more of a commodity type product where there's low differentiation from product to product, and it's a low cost because a lot of times cost is what determines if a customer is going to choose your product or not, right? Very cost centric. And so what you do here is not only place your product in the appropriate box here, but also all the other products in your marketplace to ensure you understand how you compare, where you compare to your competition. And again, don't just do this at the launch stage. Also create one for the growth stage and predict maybe what new products are coming on. That's what we talk about investigating the market, even if you understand it. What are those changes, those micro changes you see coming that might bring about some change up as your product gets into the growth stage? Same thing for the maturity stage or the decline stage. So do a chart for each one. Helps you as a product manager, as a marketer, to understand what your strategy should be. But also a secondary benefit of this is understanding the conversation you inevitably going to have both with your sales force and with your customer. And that's going to be a cost versus value discussion. It's probably going to come up, I'd say, probably 10 billion times during the life of a product. And you want to be prepared not only to talk about it at launch, where everything's new and exciting and probably it's leading the marketplace, but how is that conversation going to mature, say, in the maturity stage when there is actually some valid competition? How is that conversation going to change as you're getting into the decline stage where maybe there are other products that are a lot better? What is the value messaging that's going to help your sales force to sell the product? What is that messaging that's going to help convince your customer to buy? I get a little ahead of myself with my mouse clips here, but I think you get the point. I don't think I missed anything. Also with branding, not to mention too much here, but when you're talking about branding, just make sure it's something you're doing early on. If you are in a small company and you're also the branding manager, then hopefully not much of a risk of agreeing with yourself. Sometimes we do have those conversations with ourselves, hopefully outside of the earshot of our coworkers, but make sure that there's alignment there. In some of the larger organizations, when there is a corporate branding team, you want to ensure that you're complying with the branding guidelines. Just get that out of the way early on, because last minute changes or last minute conflicts can be costly. And I'm just speaking from experience here, where at the last minute, sometimes you're telling sales representatives that their promised date of April, that we're making them a liar, and it's really going to be July. So they're upset because they have to go back and tell the customer that the date's changed. Maybe your packaging engineer has sent the packaging in for approval and has already sent out an order. So if there's maybe some branding changes there, they're upset because you just wasted some of their budget and you caused delays. So when you don't get the branding right, not only do you affect yourself and your timelines, but there's a lot of other parts of the team that aren't going to be as happy. So just approach this early on, check the box, and get it out of the way. Now we move on to pricing. I think we all will agree that pricing is very important. It helps ensure that we hit our revenue targets for the product, and by good strategy behind pricing ensures that it's competitive in the marketplace. Ties well into the rationale behind doing this quadrant chart very early on to make sure you understand how pricing affects the rest of the marketplace and the product acceptance. But it is kind of surprising that how many people leave this to the end, and it's pretty scary to see that sometimes they just look to the market as a signal and price within the bands that are in the market, which is very subjective and doesn't have much of a data backing behind your decisions. And a lot of times pricing is going to come up in terms of its rationale. Senior leadership is going to want to know how you just determine your pricing, and you better be able to understand and explain why you chose the pricing that you did. And a lot of times, again, that's just giving you and your team time to do it. Again, going back to look at pricing not only for launch early on, but look at pricing for all the other stages of the product life. And don't become a martyr and go out and do this totally on your own. There's a lot of other experts within your company that should be helping there. Talk with sales, talk with customer service about the warranty, talk to your developers or your manufacturing engineers about the cost of goods. And again, not only what they think they're going to be at launch, but how things are going to change throughout the life cycle of the product. One great example that I continually bring up when I'm talking about this is a product manager that, because of timing or whatever, did a lot of the pricing himself. And at the end of the day, a couple years after the product launched, the profitability, the margins on this actual device was reduced by 30% because of an increase in steel costs. And the product manager says, well, there's no way that I could have predicted an increase in the cost of steel. So I'm not really, I don't really feel too bad about this happening, and I don't really hold myself accountable. And the thought there is, yeah, you probably couldn't understand, or probably, it wasn't reasonable for you to understand the forecasting of steel, the price of steel, but there was probably someone within your organization, maybe a manufacturing engineer, that probably did understand that and could have given you the right information to make those predictions and to better forecast what was going to happen to that cost of goods and the profitability of your product a couple years out. So again, don't be a martyr. Don't go it by yourself. Get people involved early and often to make your planning more successful. All right, always good to understand marketing operations strategy, meaning what marketing tools, what processes are you going to use, not only at launch, but again, at all the stages of the product life cycle. One, it's good to know that because they are going to change, and you don't want to be just by default left to tools and processes that you use at launch and the other stages just because you didn't plan for them. And secondly, in some organizations and some products that have large marketing budgets, you need to understand what those marketing budget requests are going to be with a lot of forethought, right? You need to give a lot of time to get backing and support and approval for those larger budgets. Sometimes it's not unheard of to have to understand it 12 to 18 months ahead of time to, again, make sure that it's budgeted appropriately, that you have that organizational support and understanding of the need, because at the last minute, asking for a large sum of money to complete your marketing operations plan, no matter how good of a crying performance you can put on, if the money's not there, the money's not there, and that can really throw a wrench into your plans for getting the market adoption at those different life cycle stages. All right, moving on here, I'm going to cover the next section pretty broadly. So this is sales strategy, customer support strategy, all the cross-functional areas that need to be part of your product life cycle plan. So again, wouldn't recommend writing these yourself and then throwing them over the wall and saying, here, Mr. Sales Director or Vice President of Sales, here's your sales strategy, go implement this. That tends not to be received very well. But when you get folks involved very early on, you not only talk about what the strategy needs to be, should be, getting their opinion on launch, but also all the other stages of a product's life, the conversations go a lot better. They appreciate, again, the collaboration and the forethought and getting involved. And a lot of times there's no issue of these different groups taking responsibility for these different sections of the planning, right? Because it is their area of expertise. So get the broader team involved, reach across the aisle, and do it again early and often to make sure that you're getting the right input and entering that into the holistic plan. And so we talk about financials a lot of times, not in passing, but as probably the milestone of decision making in a lot of organizations, right? No matter how strong the customer need is, if you're for some reason unable to translate that to financial or revenues, then there's a chance or a good chance that the product's not going to get approved. So in a lot of our organizations, the reality of it is that Jerry Maguire sits on the board of all organizations, and at the end of the day, all he's saying is, show me the money. And so not that customer value shouldn't be the focus, but you have to be able to then translate customer value to revenues. And again, the way to do that is to look at the financial forecasting early and often and look at it very completely. So not just to come up with a single financial forecast, because we talked about that. Who knows what's really going to happen in the marketplace over the life cycle of a product? You're making predictions, you're making assumptions, but you really don't know. So in that vein, my suggestion and my best practice is to come up with a range of financial forecasting, making different assumptions to come up with the worst case. If everything is doom and gloom, what is the financial return going to look like, and is that something we can accept as an organization? If it's all sunshine and roses and it's the best case, what does that look like, and what is the best case we can expect to achieve? And also the expected, a lot of times someplace in the middle there. What is going to be the expected case? And again, making sure that all the assumptions that you make are very transparent and well-defined for folks to understand. But this is important for two things. One, it gives your forecasting a little more credibility. You're not trying to make people believe that you can predict net revenues down to the dollar 10 years out for a product with all the possibilities that can come about in the marketplace. And secondly, it gives you, as the responsible person, some flexibility, that you're not just hanging your reputation on one number. It's more of a range and saying, here, I think we're going to come within this band. So I sleep a little better at night knowing that I'm hanging my hat on a range of forecasting rather than an exact dollar figure. So performance metrics is what these are here. Why that's important early on is to make sure that how you're defining success is exactly the way that everyone else, especially your boss and your boss's boss, is deciding on success. Take it, for example, in the early launch stages. If you're saying that the number of units sold is how you're measuring success, and your boss is saying it's actually total net revenues that define success, well, you may be successful in your eyes, but may not be successful in her eyes. So making sure that there's alignment across the definition of success, not only at the launch stage, but how are you going to measure success in the other stages? What does success look like in the growth stage and getting agreement to that? What does success look like in the maturity stage? And making sure that everyone's on the same page so you don't run into any unfortunate discrepancies later on. And that when you go out there and you're focusing on something, it's something that you're going to get rewarded for if you do it right. And then lastly here, it's good to understand very early on how you're going to review the product plan and establishing those specific review points throughout the life cycle. We all know how busy we get with other things. Once a product's launched, there's other products we're working on, there's other projects, there's fires we're trying to put out. And a lot of times we say we're going to put aside the time and effort to do these follow-ups and these plan refreshers, but we really don't. But if you actually put it down within the plan and verbalize that's going to happen and get agreement from that cross-functional group, it makes it a lot easier, and it's going to make it a lot more of a successful overall effort when you're putting it in there. So you're able to look at, well, how has the market changed? Did the market change the way we forecast, or did something come about differently? You know, how has the need for our product changed? How has the product changed itself? How has the competition changed? You know, putting in periodic established reviews that you hold yourself to is critical to that overall product success planning. And again, it's something you want to look at each stage, right? So set those milestones, you know, at the growth stage, at the maturity stage, at the decline stage, and, you know, at sunsetting, to understand if your predictions have come true, and if not, how you need to adjust that plan. And most importantly here, we just talked about a lot of different things, and this plan can get quite voluminous, if you will, if you put everything in there. So maybe you did this incredible focus group with customers, and you just received the transcription for the whole 60 minutes of the focus group, and you want to put that 300 pages of transcribed conversations in the product plan. Great, you know, it's good to have in there as point information, but for everyone's sake, put it in the appendix or the appendices and reference it in the document, maybe tease out some of the key takeaways, but don't put the whole document in there. Save the plan for the important assumptions, the important evaluations, the important opinions that you're making, and all the data that supports those opinions and decision making. Put that in the appendix. If folks want to really read it, they'll go there, but no one likes to see that they have to flip through a 300-page product lifecycle plan to really get a good appreciation for what the strategy is. So cover the main parts in the plan and put the rest in the appendix. All right, so there is a quick review of the product success plan itself. Covered it real quickly. If you do have any questions or you want to talk about some more, please feel free to reach out to us at info@ontargetstrategy.com. Happy to discuss anything at length with you. We love talking about this stuff. We kind of get geeked out about it. Maybe a character flaw there. Who knows? I'll let you make that decision. But again, please feel free to reach out to us. So if you do want to request a copy of the template, again, no obligation. Use it however you see fit. Go to our website at www.ontargetstrategy.com. Go to the main menu here, hover over the More. You'll be able to choose from a sub-menu down there. Choose Business Management Tools. Click on that. When you do click on Business Management Tools, here's the page that you're going to get. Go about halfway down. In the teal boxes here, you can see that says Request Free Product Success Planning Template. That's what we just reviewed. Put your name in here, enter your email, hit Get Template, and within 24 hours, we will send you a copy of the template. So that's what we have for you here today. I hope you found a lot of it of value, maybe a couple things, a couple takeaways of value. But we really enjoyed the conversations we've had already about product success planning. Again, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any other thoughts or comments or questions. And hope to be talking to you again at another webinar about different marketing, business management, and product management topics. Again, thanks again, and everyone have a great day.